You're about to see exactly how Ukraine made Russia's most expensive air defenses chase shadows. First, hundreds of drones lit up the radar. Then 6 HIMARS decoys cost over $1 million, but forced Russia to reveal its guard. And finally, a single low-flying drone exploited the radar's blind spot, striking the command center with precision. That's when Ukraine launched its real missiles, straight into Belgorod's power grid. In this video, I'll break down the layers of deception, step by step, so you'll understand why this strike is being called a masterclass in modern warfare. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Russia declared victory, but what exactly made them so confident and vulnerable at the same time? In Belgorod, authorities staged parades, issued announcements, and spread images of the city's stability across state media. To outsiders, this was a signal that the region was no longer in danger of Ukrainian strikes, that it could serve as a safe rear area where trains, trucks, and weapons might flow toward the front lines without disruption. The show of order mattered as much as the war itself. Power stations ran at full capacity. Freight yards carried armored vehicles straight toward the Donbass. Military barracks filled with troops could count on uninterrupted electricity, heat, and supplies. It was a portrait of dominance, designed to send a message not only to domestic audiences, but also to Ukraine and the wider world. Yet, beneath this staged stability lay a dangerous contradiction. Belgorod's modern battlefield machine depended almost entirely on one central source of power, a hub tied to multiple substations that lit command posts, radar stations, and fuel pipelines. Remove that single node, and suddenly the glowing picture of control would flicker out. Russia presented an image of overwhelming security, but in practice the system was fragile. The country had staked its military confidence on the reach of one protective umbrella, the S-400 surface-to-air missile system. Celebrations described Belgorod as untouchable under this shield, a fortress situated just across the border. The S-400 represented Russia's pride in layered air defense. With claimed ranges of hundreds of kilometers, it was meant to deny access to aircraft, missiles, or drones. For Russian commanders, planting an S-400 battery near Belgorod implied that no serious threat could approach the power plant, rail yards, or barracks. That's why the fanfare about the city mattered. It wasn't just a local propaganda exercise, it was rooted in the belief that technology had created near-total safety. But history has shown, from the Atlantic Wall of World War II to Baghdad in 1991, that powerful defenses often mask an over-reliance on narrow choke points. What looks invulnerable on maps can collapse if attackers strike the right seam. Analysts had warned that no matter how advanced a missile system becomes, it still depends on radar coverage and consistent power feeds. The S-400 could track objects across great distances, but terrain, altitude, and energy requirements carved out blind zones. Radars mounted above tree lines lose sight of low-flying objects skimming close to the ground. Command vehicles distributing data demand continuous electricity. A disruption in either one, visibility or energy, and the umbrella of protection becomes far thinner than advertised. Ukraine's intelligence understood this technical flaw, but knowing it existed was different from proving it could be exploited in practice. The reality was stark. Belgorod's survival as a staging hub rested on the nerve center of its power grid, linked directly into the nodes, keeping the S-400 radar network alive. This plant functioned as the heartbeat of local defense. Remove it, and the eye of the system would blink shut. Behind the flags and speeches, dependence on one plant exposed Russia's position more clearly than parades ever could. It was strength arranged like glass, hard to penetrate if untouched, but breakable with one precise strike. Ukraine recognized that the reliance on a single defensive eye was not just a weakness. It was the first crack in a wall that had been advertised as seamless. The next challenge for Ukraine was to turn this theory into opportunity. Direct attacks risked instant interception. So instead, Kyiv planned to spread confusion, creating a distraction so huge that Belgorod's blind spot would shift from being a technical possibility into a very real opening. How do you trick the most advanced radar system into chasing nothing while your real weapons slip through? That was the challenge Ukraine faced as it prepared to strike Belgorod. The S-400 was built to track long-range threats and stop them in mid-air, but sheer volume can overwhelm even the sharpest sensors. So, during one long night, Ukraine launched more than 230 drones in different directions, covering 8 Russian regions. On radar screens, the sky lit up with swarms of dots. Too many to track, too many to predict. Operators stared at blinking movements that looked identical, unable to distinguish which signal meant danger and which signal was nothing but wasted energy. Every false target demanded attention. Every one forced decisions in seconds. From the Russian side, the pressure was mental as much as technical. Imagine watching dozens of signals appear, split apart, then reappear in new formations across your screen. Each object could be a warhead, or just a drone flying with a few kilograms of explosives. No defense crew could afford to hesitate. So missiles, anti-air guns, and interceptors fired continuously, chasing after targets that posed little more than a nuisance. This constant reaction drained ammunition and narrowed focus. Still, operators kept believing another wave might carry the real danger. That belief was what Ukraine counted on. The deception deepened when Ukraine added a more expensive layer. 6 separate salvos of HIMARS rockets entered the mix. Each GMLRS rocket cost around $170,000, making these salvos worth over $1 million combined. But in this case, no strikes were planned on ground targets. The rockets existed only to serve as bait. They drew concentrated fire from the S-400 defense network, lighting up radar channels even further. Russian operators were convinced they had caught the center of the strike. Systems prioritized intercept. Launches filled the sky with bright streaks, chasing down what commanders assumed were lethal projectiles headed for Belgorod's heart. But nothing struck vital assets. These rockets were never meant to land. Their destruction was the real goal. It was a massive gamble. Sacrificing so many expensive rockets would be reckless if no opening followed. The choice required a cold calculation. Risk money, preserve aircraft, expose weaknesses, and buy a window of time. Ukraine's planners wagered that drowning the S-400 with noise, distractions, and costs would carve out that moment. And while Russian defenses celebrated shooting down salvos, another piece of the trap was already in motion far closer to the ground. Sliding beneath radar coverage came the UJ-26 drone. Smaller, slower, but stealthy in its low flight path, it hugged the terrain like a submarine beneath waves. By design, radar arrays, looking for threats hundreds of kilometers away, leave dead zones close to the Earth. Hills, buildings, and curvature mask craft that move at a few hundred feet. This drone went entirely unnoticed as the sky above filled with frantic interceptions. The distraction shielded its approach until it reached the nerve center of the S-400 battery itself, the command vehicle. The drone slammed into its target. At once, radar screens went dark. Operators who had been tracking hundreds of signals suddenly had none at all. Situational awareness, already strained, collapsed. That silence was the cue Ukraine needed. Almost immediately after the radar shut down, a coordinated volley of HIMARS rockets, aimed not at decoy, but at purpose, struck the main transformer feeding Belgorod. In seconds, the city's grid collapsed. Civilians filmed the outcome, a blazing fire that lit the night sky. NASA's firm satellite picked up the heat signature, removing any doubt that this was no simple technical fault. Russia's claim of a transformer accident could not stand against the visual and infrared evidence. The deception had unfolded in stages: swarm drones, costly decoys, and the decisive strike. And all of it worked because Russia never imagined the blind spot would be exploited with such discipline. This strike was never just about destroying a building. By targeting Belgorod's thermal power plant, Ukraine proved that collapsing a system could cripple more than any direct assault on soldiers. Railways froze, ammunition lines stalled, and command centers went quiet when the megawatts stopped flowing. That single hit exposed a deeper truth. The battlefield stretches far beyond trenches and artillery ranges. So the real question is this: will future wars be won not at the front line, but by disabling the networks that keep armies alive? One strike against the right node can silence an entire city and shift a war.